Hello and welcome to Project Management Basics, everything you need to make your project a success. This is episode 2, starting. So in the first episode we talked about your project and the basics of being given a mandate to start your project and doing some research. And here we're going to progress on with that. These sessions are going to be, as they always are, practical, minimum jargon, talking about the free tools, and in this case we are actually going to download and use them, and a 10-minute session typically. So starting, this is all about ordering and organizing your project. We want to get our project off on the right foot. We want to develop that research we talked about in the last session and document it. We want to assess the scale and complexity of the project. Many organizations will have guidance and rules about how much management effort you should apply to a project depending on its scale, complexity, value, etc. If you don't have that, don't worry, because we're going to provide some of that for you here. We're going to firstly assume this project actually is a small, low complex project, but we're also going to give reference to working with larger projects as well. We're going to be developing a plan, developing a business case, a justification of why the project is worth doing and at what point the project may not be worth doing anymore should it go wrong, and obtaining approval to proceed on into delivery. So we're not delivering at any point here, we're just getting all of our ducks in a row, getting everything sorted out and making sure we are ready to go. Now, this isn't always linear. We're going to be going around a little bit here. We're going to be doing some planning and we're going to be doing some risk management as well. These are the next 2 sessions actually where we focus on those in detail. But in de-risking we'll be changing our plan, and as we plan through we might introduce some risks or identify some more risks. We might need to change some things about who's appointed to do what or what the scope of the project might be even, and so all of that is in the round. It all comes together, and so we're going to bounce backwards and forwards between these topics. So planning and risks, further details and the links to those sessions are in the comments below. I just want to finish off this introduction to the session by talking about a principle of project management and why we are really focusing in the starting process on getting everything structured and the best we can before we really get started in delivery. So here we think about our project life cycle, and we can think about the ease of making changes to our project as we progress through it. And that's actually going to become more difficult. It's not going to be as easy. At the beginning it's nice and easy to make changes. It's just a theoretical exercise, right? We're just writing down stuff, planning it out, organizing what we're going to do. Actually, as we get further into that can start to become a challenge, because we'll have to rework existing plans and sections if we start making changes. But as we progress further on and we start to perhaps let contracts, buy things, organize things, start to put things together and assemble them perhaps in a real world sense, that all becomes more and more difficult to then go back and make changes. Might have time impacts, will certainly have cost impacts. So the cost of change also goes up in a similar way. So ease of making change goes down, cost of making changes goes up. And for all those exactly same reasons. And this is an important idea to hold in our mind when we're thinking about the starting process. We don't want to find ourselves, there's an easy trap to fall into of spending all your time planning the project and not actually doing it. That's not very good, clearly. And there's an easy trap to fall into of not planning enough and coming across all these emerging events as you get further in. So that's a difficult balance, and if you're doing your first project, that's a very difficult balance. We'll talk a bit more about that in the planning and risk sessions, but we need to hold that idea in our mind, that we need to get the planning, it's an 80-20 thing. We need to get the planning as good as it can be in a reasonable period of time, but recognizing that if we've got some fundamental issues still outstanding, we think there are areas that might change, that's going to cost us, and we always need to be addressing those as soon as we possibly can. Okay, so we're going to move on now and look at setting up the free tools, Community Edition and Planner. I gave you the link in the last session. It's also in the details below here, and I'm going to go off now to the form and have a look at filling that in and downloading the tool. Okay, so here we are on our website. I've pre-filled in the form here. You'll need to put in your email address and fill in the word verification, and then you could submit that. Now that will come back straight away with a link to download and install the application right now if you want to. We'll have also sent you that by email so that you can go away and think about it and install it later, or pass it on to a friend, or do various other such things. But I'm going to run the installer now here. It's a standard Windows installer. It'll download in the way that your browser normally downloads these things. So in this case I've downloaded it here and I'm just going to run. It's going to take a moment to download. And then it's going to go through the normal Windows, is it okay to install this type process, and then we'll have the installer open in just a second. Okay, so the installer has opened up for me. I'm just going to go through and agree to the licensing. It's going to install it normally into my program files on my local PC. If you've already got Community Edition installed and you're doing an upgrade, it'll upgrade Community Edition and Planner instead of installing them. And also you can take this install and turn it into a portable version. That means a files only application that you can zip up, or you can run from a USB stick, and you can pass around like that. So we are installing it, but you then have the option of taking it portable should you want to do that. Here we're going to stick with a simple one though, just installed into the local environment. So that's a pretty quick process to finish, and when we come down here we'll now see I've got these two icons on my desktop. Community Edition, which is here always going to be our starting point, and also the Planner tool. So if I open Community Edition, you'll see it has the ability to open existing projects, and it comes with a set of example empty but example template projects. We're going to create our new project here though, and in fact you can create as many projects in here as you want to, and you can have different types. So you can create a project from these standard methods. As I mentioned, we've got some pre-scaled methods here for different complexities of project. We're going to go for a 3-step project, which is for your low complexity projects, single deliverable. The other methods will allow you to go for something even smaller, just a business as usual type activity, or up into gradually more complex project environments. So I'm going to call this my Office Move project, and that will create that from the standard method. And now I can come and open my existing project. We'll see that there, Office Move project. So this is the framework for an Office Move. It's a nice, simple, like I say, simple, about as simple as you can get really in project terms. Start, deliver, close. Says it's single delivery only, and it says here on the diagram, gives us some advice about what we're doing. So in fact we'll come straight into this project concept area, create, mandate and obtain business approvals. That's just what we were talking about in the Your Project section. And I was saying you really need a mandate to be able to progress in your project. And hopefully your boss is going to give you one. It's going to be an email, a note of a meeting, something that describes what project's going to have to be. A note from the program, perhaps telling you what they want the project to do. If you don't get one, then you've got a nice template here, Project Mandate, which enables you to fill some in some basic information and store it. Now all of these systems, or all the templates and documents within here, follow our document management system. So you've got audit trail, version control, documentation of your project nicely assured. So what we're going to do is firstly check this template out. The hover there tells me I'm checking it out to edit it. It's going to open in Word because it's a Word file, and the little red cross tells me it's checked out. And this is going to give me a standard template for Project Mandate. It tells me what I might be filling in, an introduction about what's required, an outline business case, why are we doing the project, and who the interested parties are. So I would come in here and update this with some information, and save, close, and check in. I could give it a description if I wanted to, which is my first draft. And it will store that as a new version. So every time I make changes like this, checking them out, checking them back in, it stores new versions for me. So that's really good. If things are changing in the project, I can look back and see when they changed. I can keep notes about who asked me to change the various things. And I can come back and look at those earlier versions and view them, or I can check out or view the current version, of course. Double clicking in the tree will always give me a view of the current version. So this current version now has those changes in that we made a second ago. So we'll always get that latest copy of the file. So we've got that here with my update that I added, and you'll see up here it names it as version 2. So we've got something that keeps us in good version control with our content. Now the other thing is, some of these documents are provided, well, they always come with a hint and a tip telling me what I might do with that content. This one's obviously got some content in, it's got a template file. This one doesn't. We're being encouraged from the very beginning to store our communications around the project. We're talking to the board, the executive, the people who have asked us to do the project, who are going to be responsible for the project. They're going to be sending us communications, we're going to be sending them communications. As part of documenting the project, that's very important, and this is the place we should store those sorts of things. And so we can add new content to here. So using add file, I can browse to select some things. So I'm going to browse to my desktop and find some things that I'm interested in. So I've got various notes of meetings and things like that here that are related to the project, and emails and all sorts of things. I'm going to just select one of those and add it. So we've got a data file here that somebody sent me, and that'll then be included. It won't have removed it from its original source. It's taken a copy and put it in my project documentation. And so I can build up documentation here around the project. Now this is telling me the things that I need to be dealing with at the concept level. If I come back to my diagram, and we're simply pointing and clicking here and go to Start, which says extend the mandate to prepare plans, controls, define deliverables and policies for the project. That's what we're talking about, standardizing, laying out, structuring what we're going to do to start the project. And now you see it shows me a range of other things. It shows me some of the same things again, so I still see my project mandate because this is the input to my start process, and I can see the versions that I put in before, and I can see my comms folder with any comms that I've put in already. So it's having a library of content, but it's only showing me the things that are relevant to each point in the process. And so we're going to be starting to do things like making appointments. We need to decide as part of this project who else is going to be involved. Is it just going to be me as the project manager? If so, what are my responsibilities? Who's appointing me? Are there any bounds to my capabilities, or what I should be involved in or what I shouldn't be involved in? So that can be documented. Often organisations have standard role definitions for things like this, or you can document your own. The same will be applying for the executive, the person who you're reporting to, the sponsor of the project. You may well feel it's helpful to create a role definition for them, defining what they're going to be doing and what their responsibilities and involvements are going to be in the project, so you can sign them up to the things that you want them to be able to do. There'll be lots of things you will need help from other people with, accessing resources, getting decisions made, etc. So if you can write those into somebody's role, you have a better ability to upwardly manage, which is an important part of project management. Then we're going to come down into plans and controls. We're going to cover this in much more detail in the next section, two sections, but this includes templates for finances, so we can start to record some information about the costing of the project, a project status reporting, which we'll talk about later as well, and schedules, risks and issues. This is our template for managing the plan and the risk and issue registers for this project. Now in many projects we'll come down and think about benefits management here as well. It's an important part of the business case actually. If it's a regulatory project we have to do it or we're going to be out of business, well, it's a pretty clear case that we need to do it. We may still undertake some benefits management because it might help us understand what else there is to gather out of this project. We're complying to regulation, therefore there are some reputational benefits, and we can try and do things to help maximize those, which bring us something else, perhaps other than just being in business still. But if we're doing it as a commercial project to save money or to make money, we need to understand how exactly that is broken down, when those benefits are going to come, what they're likely to be, because that's a good test of the business case of the project. If we're going to generate benefits of £100,000 from this project, but the project's going to cost £90,000 to do, then there's not much margin between those two figures. And if as we start to work through the project we understand that the benefits are not really quite what we thought they were going to be, but the costs are going up, well, at some point it's not worth doing the project anymore. And so getting a really good handle on those benefits is good for those particular sorts of projects. It's a good exercise to do anyway, but in a small complex project you may consider not doing it. So a small low complexity project, you may consider not doing it. And we're working our way through this towards the end objective, which is producing our PID. Now, project initiation document is the name that comes from the Prince2 methodology that many of you will probably have heard of. Other methodologies have a different name for this document. It might be called the project plan, it might be called the project charter. It's the document that defines and wraps up what exactly is going on in the project. It's an updated, souped up version of the mandate with much more detail and structure in that lays out exactly how we're going to deliver this project. And so we can open that template up and have a look. Here you'll see I'm just clicking on it, I'm viewing it, I'm not going to change it here, but I could change it of course by checking it out, making changes, checking it back in again. And all this process is about taking us through these steps, documenting what we're going to do, taking us towards this endpoint. Again, this is a Prince2 template. You don't have to use this. You can take some of the sections out if you want to. You can add other sections in. You're not going to be using the section on tailoring Prince2, for example. So the contents are there, and the headings are here for you to start filling things in. Actually, because this is a Prince2 template, it includes a guidance section at the end about what you might consider putting in each of these sections, which is really quite useful if you're not familiar with project management documentation. So it's talking about what goes in to these various areas. So let's go through a couple of them and have a think about that. We've got project definition. That's the description of the project again, but probably expanded. We've got the project approach. How are we going to go about addressing this? Are we doing all the work in-house? We're going to buy it in from suppliers, multiple suppliers which we manage. We're going to buy a product off the shelf. It's that idea, the general approach to how we're delivering the project. The business case, expanded a little bit, it'll refer back to benefits, but this is the overall business case of doing the project. Team structure and role descriptions. You probably won't, if you've already put those in those other areas, you probably won't repeat them, you'll just refer back to them. Quality management approach is about identifying how we're going to get the quality that we expect. Quality and quantity sort of interchangeable a little bit here, but quality is about is it going to be good enough to achieve the objectives? And obviously part of your objectives might be quality related. You want something to last for a certain amount of time. You want it to be capable of operating at a certain sort of speed. And how are you going to test or examine those things? How are you going to write those things into the requirements as you specify that? Change control is about how you're going to manage change. We talked earlier about how important change is. We don't want to be making changes willy-nilly, because certainly once we get further through the project, they're going to be costing us, both in terms of slowing us up and costing us money, and potentially affecting the quality as well. So changes should be made in a very structured way. Once we've agreed what we're going to do for the project, we shouldn't be making changes willy-nilly. We should be agreeing them and assessing them in each case to identify whether they're worth doing against the impacts they're going to have. Risk management approach, how we're going to identify risks, how we're going to assess them, etc. And we'll be talking much more about that in the next sections. Communications management, again we've got a session on communications coming up. Not unsurprisingly, the sessions that we've got coming up are matching the sort of things in here, because this is what it means to deliver the project. So communications management, how we're informing the stakeholders, the people that are getting something out of this project or putting something into this project. How are we going to be discussing things with the suppliers and then the team members? Who's going to be updated on what sort of frequency and about what sort of information? And if something happens as an emergency, people can come here and see who they're supposed to tell. You might be on holiday, for example. They can come here and find out who they're supposed to communicate with about various things. An overview of the project plan, project controls as well, and as I say, tailoring, customizing. This method effectively is pre-customized to a small low complexity project. As you become more mature, we'll talk about maturity as well later, you might start to think about personalizing some of this to match the particular aspects of the project. So this is a place where you can document all this, and to some extent there is some repetition here, and that's what it's a bit like in projects, unfortunately, but for good reason. We're taking something which is a gem of an idea and we're building it up, and we're taking it to the next step so that we can do something more with it. We've done that with documenting a mandate. We've got agreement to come in and do the start process. Now essentially we're going back and saying again, right, now we've really worked out what it is that we want to be doing. We've done some planning, we've worked out what the risks are, we know what the costs are, we know what the benefits are, we know this is a viable project. The business case says it's worth doing, and we want to go ahead and do it. So I'd like to have sign off on that, please. Can you please confirm you're happy for me to deliver against this documentation? So that's why documenting this stuff is important, because later on projects don't always go very well, and people are always looking for the first person to take responsibility for them, which usually is the project manager. And if the project manager can say, well, look, we're delivering what it said here, if that's all I can be expected to do, this is your defense, this is your shield from the problems that come elsewhere in the organization, and you should be carefully agreeing changes to this with the people that are asking for changes, with the authority of the sponsor or owner or executive of that project if that's required. So these are important aspects in terms of setting up your project. Okay, so that was the session on starting. In the next session we're going to be looking at planning, but as I say, the sections on planning and risks really can be taken, it's worth looking at all of those together with the starting one to get a good feel for that. Okay, thank you very much.